it's Leela, the proud Poly Kinky Queer Slut. Today's question is, what is the difference between a boundary and a rule? So, boundaries are very, very important, and I think that it's kind of newer terminology coming into our world of understanding what boundaries are and how to use them. But I see a lot of times them being applied in kind of I'm going to go say it in the wrong way. Where what people are doing is actually making rules and not boundaries. So I want to talk about the difference. So a rule is a condition you set for somebody else that then you try to enforce. So for example, you might have a rule for your children that they're not allowed to cross the street by themselves. And then if they do cross the street by themselves, they get punished for that that needs to be enforced. That rule needs to be enforced. A boundary is different. A boundary is a decision you make for yourself, and the way that you enforce that is with your own actions. So I'm going to give some practical examples here. So for example, I might have a boundary that is that I do not want people to tell me how to dress. Like, I will not have people telling me how I present myself to other people. Now, that means that so somebody violates that boundary. So let's say somebody says, you know what, I really hate that shirt. I wish you wouldn't wear that anymore. I then maintain that boundary by saying, you do not have the authority to tell me that. It's a boundary for me that I do not accept that kind of criticism and feedback. So I'm going to ignore what you just said. And then if they persist, I might need to escalate my boundary in terms of choosing not to spend my time in the presence of that person. I am not telling them, you may not say those things to people ever again. I am saying, I do not want that in my life. So I'm going to make that choice. So, in my life, a lot of times the people I've cut from my life are because of boundary violations. So a poignant example from my life was that my father was an abusive person. And I, in my early 20s, I told my family that, and I set a boundary that is, I will not be at any family event where this person is present. And then I would show up at a family event and the family members would tell me, oh, by the way, he's on his way. So they did not respect my boundary. So I left. And when that happened repeatedly, I said, you know what? You cannot respect my boundary. So I am going to not be interacting with you anymore. That's a boundary. A rule would have been, he can't come to these events anymore. And then when they did invite him, somehow punishing them, saying, you are a horrible person because you did this. Or, one of the problems with rules, the big problem with rules, is that our ability to force them is limited. We can only enforce to the degree that we have control. Right. So, it may be pretty simple when you've got a kid that's not supposed to eat candy and they got into the cookie jar and you can punish them. But, you can give them a timeout for sneaking the cookie. But most of the time, we don't have that kind of power over other people. We don't have the ability to really enforce rules. Take this a romantic relationship or a friendship. Generally the power dynamic of those relationships is not one where one person has a strong power dynamic over the other. It's not a situation where you can take somebody's treat away because they misbehave. And frankly, if that is the dynamic, that has certain challenges. And I'm just going to say it, unless you're actually negotiating this as a kinky thing, I think there are problems with that kind of dynamic because you're conceding your personal autonomy to somebody else if you're giving them the power to punish you. Whereas if you are operating with boundaries, then you're the one who makes the action. You have control over your own actions. So if you've got a boundary, then you can take action when that boundary is violated. That's on you. Rules can make us feel powerless. Rules can make us feel like we don't have agency. They can make us feel like we're being walked all over. Because if the rule is, no, you can't do that, but then I have no power to stop them, and they do it anyway, then I'm stuck in the position that's like, so I did it. What are you going to do about it? And the answer is there's nothing I can do about it. However, if it's a boundary, then there is something I can do about it. Because if it's not, you can't do this, it's, I do not want to have this kind of connection with you if you do that. Then you are empowered to then make that change for yourself. It hurts, it's hard, but it works. I want to give another example that's not so dire, and I'm trying to think of a good one. But one good rule of thumb with boundaries is know your boundaries, set your boundaries, but also like don't have too many walls up around yourself. Like really set the boundaries you need, but try to avoid setting arbitrary boundaries. I just thought of an example. So for example, I use condoms with my sexual partners unless we're fluid bonded, right? But there is a boundary that is common in my community and for me that, like, if I have a fluid bonded partner and that fluid bonded partner is somebody who or, you know, that with that fluid bonded partner, we're using protection with everybody else. Well, if that fluid bonded partner then chooses to have sex with somebody else without protection, that's something that violates my boundary. So then I start using protection with that person because it's no longer within my risk tolerance. So boundaries, also flow really well with, evaluating risk and risk profiles, risk tolerances. Hope that's helpful. Boundaries are great. They allow you to function, but they also allow you to know when it's a good time to end something or to change something, and making sure you're watching out for yourself and getting what you need. I really appreciate them, and I really appreciate using them to create a structure in my life that supports me and makes my life what I need it to be. So, thank you very much for listening. This is Leela, the proud Poly Kinky Queer Slut. Email me your questions at kinkyqueerslut@gmail.com. Thanks very much and have a great day.